Welcome, 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 239 Uncensored, everything Southwest Florida and beyond. And we have an unbelievable podcast today. A friend of mine, somebody who is revered in our county, Judge Chris Brown. Welcome to the studio, Judge.
Thanks so much.
All rise.
Not at this point. I am undercover right now, Tim.
You're undercover.
But my old friend, it's good to be here. I was honored to be invited, so I'm looking forward to rapping with you.
Listen, it's not every day you get the chance to sit down and talk to a judge and kind of pick their brains a little bit about some of the things. Obviously, we have some limits of what we can go over, but we're going to talk about a lot of fun things, a little bit about your family, a little bit about your hobbies. We can talk a little bit about the Seminoles, the Gators.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought we were friends. Right.
No, actually, my daughter went to Florida, so yeah, she was smart enough to get in, so yeah, that was a good thing. But so you became a judge. How long have you been a judge now?
So it's been a little over 2 years. January, I think my commission was January 3rd of 23. Governor DeSantis,
was there.
I got elected in 22, county bench, and then after a year on the county bench, Governor DeSantis appointed me over 15 months, I guess.
Wow,
yeah,
wow.
It's blown by. By.
Now, going from a defense attorney to being a judge, that's definitely a different move. And we had a little discussion before that you wanted to do something. I think it's definitely community-based. Being a judge is about the community, but it was a change for you. Obviously, you wanted a change, and your practice was doing great as a defense attorney. Tell us about that change, why you made that change, and kind of fill us in on some of the differences.
Wow, we could go on a long time with that one, but I'll try to Cliff's notes it. First of all, I love my law partners, greatest guys you could ever work with. More than business partners, law partners are really like brothers when it works the right way, sisters in some cases. So shout out to Renee Suarez and Scott Weinberg and Jimmy Rios, and I'm still tight with them. Talk to them all the time. We built that firm together over the course of 16 years. We're partners together, and that was probably the hardest thing, was leaving that. Also, we were doing tremendous business, so it was a decision I had to consult with my family about, because it was leaving well-built business that was generating a lot of revenue. But I was feeling a call to public service. I always had been interested in becoming a judge. Not always, but once I had become an experienced attorney, I started watching judges work and thinking, maybe I could do that. How would I like to do it? What are the good and bad things that I see judges doing, and how would I approach the role? And I just got to a point where I felt like it was time to make a change in life, and thought that I'd do some good.
We know you did it for the money.
Yeah. Well, that was a tough question during the campaign, because a lot of people thought that, I tried to answer every citizen's question that I could to be an open. Couldn't answer questions about how I'd rule on cases, but people would say, well, how much does a judge make? And I'd say, well, they make about X amount. And they would say, well, so are you doing this for the money and benefits? And it's a hard question to answer, because it's very generous. As far as a job in the government sector, it pays extremely well, as an excellent retirement and benefits. And the people of the state of Florida are very generous to me. I think about that every day. But, a private sector successful partner in a successful law firm, it's usually going to be a pay cut. So a lot of people, like colleagues of mine who step down from those roles, they're not doing it for financial reasons. And even people who are coming from public sector, like a prosecutor to the bench, they may be going up in pay, but that doesn't mean they're doing it for financial reasons either. I mean, most people are doing it because they want to serve. They truly love the law.
Obviously, in my opinion, a judge commands a lot of respect, right? So I think also, not that you're being a judge to get that respect and you need that respect, but I think it's also a great progression in the community, as far as, hey, I'm Judge Brown, and I know you're not like that. I've been around you before, and I'm sure you're very professional on the bench, and everybody tells me you're wonderful in the courtroom. But the reality is you are in a position to, make change, I guess, or not necessarily make change, but make sure things are run in a proper way. And I think that in itself is, a great thing. And it's one of those things where I think if you're in the legal realm, I think everybody would like to have a shot at being the judge at some point. Because I mean, it does have, it's a great thing. It's like law enforcement. I didn't make a ton of money, but I had doctors, I had pilots, I had people that would wish they could try my job just one or two times, So that's a cool thing.
And people look up to you. And there's the old expression that respect is a thing that is earned. It's given. You can't take it. You can't make someone respect you. But that being said, just like with a law enforcement officer with a uniform, with the robe comes a certain level of public respect, although not in all parts of the country with some of the things we've seen in the news. But I think here, and you have to remember that. And for me, that was the hardest thing. One of the hardest things about transitioning from being a lawyer to a judge is I had to remember that every word I said mattered and my demeanor mattered a lot. I like to think I'm pretty easygoing, but if you're having a bad day, and we talk about this a lot amongst ourselves, judges, if you're having a bad day and you're in a bad mood, you have to stop and take a breath and put that aside before you walk out there. Because you can't go out there and take that out on people. They don't have, you've got the power in that courtroom. So you're abusing that if you act that way towards the public who pays your salary. They deserve respect. So I go out there every day hoping that people will walk away, especially some people, they may only go to court once in their life. A juror or a litigant, pro se litigant, that might be the only time they've ever gone to court. So their only experience is going to be with me. And they're either going to remember it as the guy was a nice guy, he acted like a regular guy, treated me, explained what was going on, or they're going to remember it as that. Who does he think he is? How dare he treat me like that? So that's not what you want.
Yeah, I used to say that to myself, right? So I'm having a bad day, so I would kind of try to kick it into gear to say, hey, listen, I'm having a bad day. I'm definitely going to work a little bit harder to make sure nobody knows I'm having a bad day,
right.
Number one. And number two, like you said, I've stopped 30 cars today. This vehicle is getting stopped. And I remember the very first time I got stopped by the police. I remember it. The guy was a jerk, and I'll never forget it. And I'm not mad at him for being a jerk because he pretty much said, hey, son, you're driving your motorcycle like 75 miles an hour in like a 50, and here's your ticket. But I do remember it. But also, it could have been a learning opportunity as well for him to do that. And it was a learning opportunity, but it was a negative contact. So as being a judge, you want to have the demeanor to say, hey, I'm in control here, but to a point where you're human too, I think is kind of a balance.
It is a balance. Yeah. And just like with an officer, we don't have the danger factor the U.S. have.
Yeah,
you're on the road by yourself sometimes. Yeah. I have bailiffs in the courtroom and the courthouse is full of cops. And so, but you have the danger of things getting out of control. And you do have to walk a line between being courteous and being kind. There's great Judge John Duryea, who's retired, one of the judges I looked up to in my career of many that we've had. He's retired. He's doing great. He's still around. He's just not a judge anymore. But he used to be so kind and polite that sometimes people in front of him, especially when he was on the criminal bench, thought, well, he really likes me. So, everything's going to go okay. I should turn down the offer the state's making because I know that Judge Duryea likes me. And he used to say, do not mistake my kindness for weakness.
Right.
Now, I don't use that phrase because I'd be stealing from him, but you have to be kind, patient, and respectful. But if people are getting out of control or taking advantage of that, you have to firmly, bring it back in line because it's not for your own ego's sake, but I guess it's more the principle that the robe is the uniform.
Yeah.
The courtroom is the courtroom of the state of Florida. And I can't allow things to degenerate into like a mob scene in there. I would be derelict in my duty.
Yeah, no, it's
got to walk that line.
It's just such an important job. And like you said, that first impression or the way you handle yourself in court is going to be remembered because you got to remember everybody that goes into court. I don't care if you've been there 10 times in the last month, you're nervous. All right. So, and like you said, most people, it's the first time or maybe the second time that they're there and they're like,
sure.
I mean, heck, I'm testifying as a police officer. I'm not going to jail, but I'm up there. I'm just as nervous as the guy that's getting, so I know how that feels. So I think having that ability to, be able to control that courtroom, control that environment and do it in a way that I think is much appreciated. By the way, I just wanted to let you know, and I know a lot of the guys that work at the sheriff's office, whenever I mention your name, they just really appreciate how you do things and you being you. So I just want to let you know that.
I'm really pleased to hear that.
I want to let you know.
I'm really pleased to hear that because I work with those guys and we have to be careful to be neutral because there's a law enforcement side and when you're dealing with criminal and then, there are, the citizens, not that they're different. Law enforcement officers are citizens. Maybe some people don't know that, but so you work with these guys and in some ways you have to be careful to maintain your neutrality because they are such good guys and they're keeping us safe in the courthouse. They're doing their jobs. They're fun to work with. And they have a lot of experience coming off the road. I've had deputies in my courtroom say, Judge, maybe you can call this guy first. We're keeping an eye on him because there's a little something off. Mm-hmm. And they're not doing it in a mean way. They're doing it that maybe this guy's got a little bit of a mental health issue or he's just he's having a bad time. Mm-hmm. And he's on the brink of maybe doing something that's going to cause him to end up getting arrested.
Yeah.
And when he doesn't need to be, but we call him first, talk to him real nice, handle his case first. And, a possible incident is avoided. So, they bring that experience to the courtroom. And when I hear bailiffs say, Judge, can I talk to you real quick before we go out there? I'm always like, yeah, what's going on?
Yeah.
Those guys are great to work with.
Well, like you said, you could be that judge, be like, no, he's going to wait until I'm ready.
You can.
Like you said, what good is that going to do at the end? Right. Why?
Why be that judge?
We're going to talk about your lovely wife. I adore her. And I was, I remember her from high school, Lynn, and the best athlete probably that I've seen play softball, also smart.
Yes.
So you outkicked your coverage. Without a doubt, you outkicked your coverage.
No one knows. It's one of the most common things I hear is, how did that happen? Why is she married to you? And I don't really know. She says I made her laugh. Maybe I did it.
And I remember her in high school, she was always fun. She was always polite, always nice. Her parents, I remember them being teachers there.
Yep.
And Lynn was always the one that would, kind of like chuckle and kind of like walk past you. And she had all good friends and they were, good kids. But how did you guys go back, regress a little bit, go back? How did you guys meet a little bit? And kids wise, you got, I think 2 or 3 kids. Yes, that's right. 3 kids. So tell us a little bit about that.
So Lynn grew up in Coquina Sands and I grew up over by the hospital. So opposite sides of the old golf course. I guess we're not. That's gone
right.
That's like many parts of Naples we grew up with. That's going to be gone. It's going to be condos, I guess. Beach club, and her brother Zach, still one of my best friends. We were roommates in law school, so we were the same. We were class of '91 at Naples. Lynn was class of '95, so she was 4 years behind us, and she was my sister's age. And they grew up playing sports together. They were on the same Queens team that won the first World Series in 1989. I still have a coffee mug with my sister and Lynn when they were 12 years old. So I've known them and that family since I was a little kid. Obviously, she was a lot younger than me, so nothing going on. When I was in high school, she was in middle school, so that would have. But we stayed in touch over the years, and it just so happened we were both back in Naples years later, single, went out a few times, and, one thing leads to another. Awesome. We're married 3 kids later, 14, almost 15 years later, and we got one going into high school this year.
Wow, that's awesome. And I knew Lynn because I was a deputy at Naples High from 1992 to 97. So I was running around high school, and now they have 2 deputies in every high school. When I was there was 1.
Right,
and we had
school.
River Park, Golden Gate never had a high school. Right. We had this majority of the kids in the city. Yep. So it was a Wild Wild West at Naples High School. Gary Brown was the principal.
I remember.
Dan White
Dan
I
White.
think when you were there, right?
I think it was Dan White when I was there, maybe towards the end, maybe my senior year, Gary Brown, but that was a long time ago.
And they had the loop out front off
loop,
22nd, and then they changed all that. The
Yeah,
entrance
the
is
senior
now
prank, I remember, was the sporks. Yeah,
I remember that.
all that stuff.
Yeah, I wasn't there for the sporks, but I was there to prevent the sporks from happening.
The next year,
Yeah,
maybe?
years after.
Yeah.
So they're like, I would go around at night, like at the end of the school year, and they would pay me to go to Naples High School and sit there from like 10 at night on a Sunday night, because they knew that Monday morning, hey, they'd pay me from 10 at night to like 4 in the morning. So I'd drive around in a car, and then I'd go home real quick, take a shower, change, come back to school, be working. It was always good.
Well, you could only do the sporks once.
Yeah, the sports.
Glad you prevented it.
No, big deal. Sports, right? Back into law. If you had one law that you could create, right? One law that you could create, and that you could hold everybody accountable to follow, what would that law be?
Well, it's funny about this. Okay, so one, I got to always be careful as a judge to talk about whether I think laws are good or bad, because the legislature makes laws. That's what people elect them for, and the governor signs them or doesn't sign them. And our job is to enforce the laws, to interpret the laws when necessary, as little as possible. Hopefully, they're usually straightforward. So, I also tend to think we may have generally too many, and I thought that before I was a judge. There's a new book out by, I think it's Justice Gorsuch. I have the book. I'm trying to remember which day. It's got Justice Gorsuch. It's called Overruled. It's a play on words. Overruled. Yep. And he's talking about maybe there are too many laws. Maybe there are too many statutes to where the average citizen doesn't know whether they're committing a felony sometimes when they're just doing a banking transaction or something.
Right.
All right. That being said, there's one thing I would make a law, and I wouldn't make no prison or anything, but I would love to see a law that says if you park on the line in a busy parking lot, take up 2 spots, that ought to be like a $25 fine, right? I mean, I have moved out of a spot and reparked to make sure that I leave room for a guy next to me. You got a packed parking lot like the Mercado, and you see a guy right on that line.
Put him in, lock him up.
Yeah, I mean,
$25.
I mean, 25, maybe $50, just enough so that they know, hey, you're not supposed to do.
You can put like a QR code on their window and say, "Pay this before you leave."
I don't know how many people are going to disagree with me on that one.
That's a good one, though. That's a good one. And you know what? It's funny you say that too, because I choked the guy's car next to me as we parked today, and I'm like, "I'll come back and get it." I was right on the line. But yeah, I've seen people take out 2 spots. But yeah, no, that'd be a good one, especially for here in Naples. Now, without getting into any particulars that would give it away, but what's one of the craziest things that you have presided over a case that is? I mean, have you done some family law too?
Well, I am a family law judge now. So when I was an attorney, I never did it.
Okay.
So now I'm in the family law division. So
does that get crazy?
It was a learning curve. It gets crazy in the sense that, there's an expression that in criminal law, you see bad people at their best. Yeah. They're in a suit and they're like, "Your Honor, I'm so sorry," And then in family law, you can see really good people at their worst. And you have to be understanding of that as a judge and say, look, this is not how this person would probably normally act, but they're going through a divorce. The other side's saying all these terrible things about them, and usually neither side is as bad as the other one saying why'd they get married in the first place, Yeah. But you do sometimes see some crazy stuff, especially in the injunctions. We do injunctions once a week, and people are filing them constantly. So once a week we have to hear Judge Kershey, who's the other family law judge in town, and some of them get really wild. We had one recently where there was a woman who was can't say names, and I wouldn't even remember but she was there's a site called OnlyFans where women go online, I guess.
Yeah. Never been there, never seen it, never heard of it.
You and I am a married man and a judge. I've never been on it, but it was explained to me in the hearing that anybody can get a subscription to it, and you can go on there and do certain acts or just take off your clothes or whatever, and you get paid by your subscribers to do these things. Well, this gal had said, this boyfriend, I'm trying to break up with him and he's stalking me. And she was on this site, and he said, well, she's on this site. And I said, well, that doesn't mean you can stalk her. I mean, So I'm not stalking her. And it got really juvenile to the point where he said she was riding through Naples Bay with her top off because she does that to film her OnlyFans show. And I said, well, what were you doing? And he said, well, I was riding through with my new girlfriend and we passed and she took her top off to teach the other one a lesson. And I said, when was this? He said, it was last Thursday in Naples Bay. I said, when? He goes, I don't know, 2 PM. I said, in the middle of Naples Bay? And I said, none of this happened when I was growing up in Naples.
Judge, where was I?
And then sometimes people will say things to me, Judge, he sent me pictures of his private parts and I have proof right here. Do you want to see it? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, I do not want to see it. You're asking me if I want to see that? And the answer is no. I'm like, sir, do you agree you sent them so I don't have to look at them? I mean, you don't want that in
Oh my God.
So sometimes, of course, you're in there for very, very serious things. There's serious domestic abuse that goes on. There's issues with the best interests of children, where they're going to live, where they're going to go to school, that are really heartbreaking decisions you have to make sometimes.
Yeah.
So you see, silly stuff like that. And then you see stuff that's just very, very, saying, this is why I'm here. This is why this job.
Yeah. Without a doubt. I mean, the kids play a big part in my heart. And, unfortunately, adults do some crazy things and use their kids as pawns. And you got to kind of filter through that and be the referee and be the judge. And, we talk about that in law enforcement. I mean, you go out there and you have to make a quick decision, very fast, that could impact a lot of people. When you arrive at these houses and you're trying to break up the fight. Next thing you know, you got both people fighting you.
That's your biggest danger, right? Traffic stops and DV.
Absolutely.
How many cops have had a domestic violence victim jump on their back or stab them from behind when they're taking the guy who just beat him up away in handcuffs?
That's crazy.
It's codependency and all those other things. But for the officer, it doesn't make a difference what the motive is. He just got stabbed. I mean, it's a real danger, And in court, you see it too, where you see somebody come in and say, well, I don't really want him to get in trouble. I just wanted somebody to talk to him, and you got a picture of somebody with 2 black eyes and a broken nose, and you're going, well, you may not have wanted that, but now it's here in court. And let's face it, we're all looking at it going, this person deserves to go.
Yeah.
They can't do that to you. You don't know right now because you're so, I guess your self-esteem or your sense of self is so out of whack.
Yeah.
You don't know what's happening to you really, but this is appalling.
Corrective action needs to happen or somebody's going to end up dead, so yeah. And that's what you got to look at as a police officer. Listen, it's nothing. I know you're having a bad day. Things aren't going well for you, but if I don't do something right now, then this is going to end up in a tragic situation. And I don't want that for anybody. So you have to tell. I used to tell when I was in training, because you'd have some police officers that are very excited about taking people to jail. Then you'd have some that are very not so excited to take people to jail, and they will do anything to get out of taking someone to jail. And it's a happy medium, but you got to explain to them, like, listen, if you don't take corrective action, or you as a judge don't make these decisions, this guy's back out on the streets, or girl's back on the streets, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
that
happens. That happens where you're trying to balance. You're saying, I want to do what's fair to this person, but on the other hand, I have to think of the safety of this person or children, especially as you said. When it comes to children, the court, our statutes are clear. This isn't my policy. Okay, any judge worth his salt or her salt, half my colleagues are women and they're great, is going to say, look, I don't care about y'all. I care about the kids. First and foremost, it's their best interest. That's what I'm going to look at. So how you act, even during the case, you got one parent trying to use the kids as pawns, like you said, and alienate them. Your dad's a jerk, this, that, dad has a new girlfriend, and you understand why mom's mad about that.
Yeah.
But she's using it on them, and the poor kids are getting messed up by that. And there's times where I remind people, I say, how you act is going to affect how I rule at the end of this when we get to trial. Just keep that in mind, because how you act, and especially how it affects the children, because their interests are all that matter to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, doing the job as a judge, you see some heavy things and hear some heavy things, and like in law enforcement. On a serious note, that you have to have a life balance. What are some of the things that after a long day of court? I know you don't go home and talk to Lynn and rehash all this stuff. And I never did when I was in law enforcement. My wife had no clue what I did during the day because that's like a switch you switch. What are some of the things you do for hobbies to just say, hey, that was my job today. Let's get past this, or let's do something and get our work on the other side.
I think sometimes physical stuff, although I've gotten a little out of shape right now, but lifting weights, stuff like that. If you have time, when you have little kids, you have to budget. You can't do that every day.
Right.
I love being involved in the kids' activities. I'm coaching Little League. Right. I've been done that the last 3 years.
That's awesome.
And my son's team, and I like going to my girls' games, volleyball, whatever they have going on, and just being a dad. And it's funny when we're at the ballpark, there's some other coaches who are lawyers who know me from the court system. They're like, "Hey, Your Honor," and I'm like, "Shh, easy on that. I don't want anybody here to know what I'm." This is me.
Yeah,
this is just Chris Brown, the dad. Like, that's my job during the day, and they don't mean any disrespect. It's habit. When you're a lawyer, you see a judge, you always say that, Your Honor. But that's me being myself. And like you said, you got to turn off the switch. When earlier in my career as a lawyer, and even towards the end, Lynn would sometimes say, you're bringing it home with you. Like, you're sitting there, but you're not fully present.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to tell her about it, and she doesn't necessarily want to. There are exceptions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You got to have somebody
where I'm like, I got to tell you what happened today.
Yeah, you got it.
But because we're human like everybody else. But she doesn't want to hear that every day, and I don't want to tell it. You want to move beyond it, spend time with your family.
Yeah, because you hear some things that are just like unbelievable in some cases, and see some things. And the worst thing I hated, working as a deputy, I'd go to a party, right? And the very first thing, I'd walk in the party. Oh, the deputy's here, the captain's here, the popo's here, the
bad
police,
guys.
And then, without a doubt, within 5 minutes, somebody would come up and they'd start, pelting you with questions. I'm sure you get it too.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine to answer them. I like it, but we're the person that just came and ruined the party. I mean,
you're like, I'm just here hanging out.
And people are like sitting there going, I wonder if he's watching how many beers I'm drinking. Hey,
like,
listen, drive home safe. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
Don't drink and drive. Get an Uber nowadays.
Right. Otherwise, who cares? I'm not counting your drinks, buddy. It's none of my business.
Yeah, exactly. But that was always one of the things. And when you're in, and the thing is, that's a role that you have to accept. I mean, it's kind of a strange role. Even as an attorney, obviously a defense attorney, you get the same type of thing. But as the judge, you're really getting it.
And if I'm at like a party or social event, I'm more worried about myself than them. They should. They shouldn't be worried about me because I'm pretty easygoing. I don't care what they do. But I'm like, people are making jokes or they're talking about a controversial topic, and I'm like, and I have something I might normally add, and I'm like, nah, I'm not going to say that.
Yeah,
because even though it's a private gathering, it's just. There's some things where, as a judge, you shouldn't be commenting on it.
Yeah.
Current events, politics, things like that. You should just stay out of it.
And it's funny you say that because I was just on a podcast built by Becker. And in that podcast, I said, I'm kind of like a kid again. Because after 31 years, law enforcement, and military, pretty strict. Not that I'm out breaking any laws or doing anything inappropriate, but I like to cut up now.
Sure.
And I like to act like a kid. And I sometimes like to, maybe I'll even drop the F-bomb where I'm not supposed to. But it's liberating in a way because I'm like, listen, man, I live this stringent life with a lot of things that I've seen and done. And now I'm going to live it. Now, you're in a situation where obviously your brothers and your sisters in your law firm, you had tons of good times there, but now that your circle has to be a little bit tighter and a little bit smaller,
Yeah, you don't leave your friends behind. And I've known some new judges. I act like I've been around forever. I've only been some years, but I'm talking brand new judges that I've spoken to where I was just at a conference who say, well, my friend invited me to lunch, but they practiced in front of me. And I said, how long have you been friends? 10 years. I said, so they didn't befriend you because you're a judge. You just became a judge. I said, do you think you have to shun them from your life? Well, I don't know. And I said, well, why would you? I said, now, if they went to lunch and started trying to talk to you about a case, you have to be like, hold on a second. I mean, you're crossing a line.
It's not a friend you want.
But you're going to assume an attorney who's your friend knows better.
Yeah,
I mean,
right,
I've maintained friendships with people that I've had for a long time, and I don't talk about cases with them. And I've had people appear in front of me that are friends of mine, and sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, and they've understood. It's my job. It's like, I'm the referee now, if you want to compare it to a sports metaphor. And I'm sorry, that's the call. And let's move on. Don't fight, don't argue the call with the referee. It never works out.
Yeah. That's true. What are some misconceptions about judges that maybe you'd like to clear up, or things that you've heard? That's always a good one.
Yeah, there's some fun ones out there. One is people think that I think we have a lot more power than we do. A judge who is what we call a textualist or an originalist, which most judges in Florida now, especially judges appointed these days by governors like Governor DeSantis, who appointed me, are looking for judges who adhere very close or dead on in most cases, unless there's an ambiguity or we can't figure it out. We're just following exactly what the law says. And precedent, unless it's clearly wrong, binding precedent, we're following it. So we're pretty constrained by that. So somebody might say to me, well, look, don't you kind of feel sorry for this side? Another judge might say that. And I say, I do, but I can't help them because the law's not on their side. The law's on the other guy's side.
Mm-hmm.
So, I do feel bad for them on a human level, but I can't go around making it up. I wouldn't be good at doing my job. I'd be breaking my oath. And it also makes justice unpredictable. People would say, well, you don't know what this judge is going to do because whoever he likes, he rules for.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't do as many things as people think. I think that's one. And the other big misconception is I think people think we know everything about every case. At any given time, I have somewhere probably between 500 and 1,000 open cases of various types. Yeah. And that's fine. We have a management process, and I focus on them as they get to trials and stuff like that. So I'm focused in when we're at key points. But other cases, the attorneys are taking depositions or they're doing various things, and I'm not involved at that level. Mm-hmm. So people think when a case comes in front of me that I know everything that's going on, everything that's been said, every piece of evidence, when in fact, the attorneys know the case. And that's why the best attorneys do well. They do the best job of presenting their case to the judge or the jury so that they put their best foot forward. Both sides are presenting the evidence they want to present, the testimony they want to present, and I'm learning during the trial what the case is about. And at the end, they're telling me, well, this is why you ought to rule my way, versa. So at the beginning, I know very little other. It's a divorce. Here's the names of the people. Here's the ages of their children. And I listen to the attorneys.
Yeah.
And their evidence.
Yeah. Or sentencing, when you sentence someone to
in criminal court.
Okay. There are some guidelines, obviously, that you have.
Yeah.
Does the acts of the individual in the courtroom have anything to do, with the sentencing? If they, obviously you can look at demeanor, you can look at remorse, you can look at a lot of different factors.
You can.
Yeah. As a judge, you're human, right? So you're going to look at those probably and
I would say that, but life history probably more.
Okay.
Because, so if somebody does a really horrible crime, and I don't even want to give examples, but, harms a child, and they're really sorry in court. I think that means something, versus somebody who's like, yeah, whatever, or,
give it to me.
But you look more at a life history, and I had a case that I tried a couple of years back, where I was the trial judge, and the gentleman was over 80 years old and was a decorated military veteran, no history. He was convicted of some felonies in relation to what we would call white collar offense. It actually was a dispute that involved like a condo board association and some stuff. And at the end of the trial, I was like, and the prosecutors, to their credit, said, we're not asking for jail time. It's just, right. we couldn't drop the case. We thought we had the evidence, and the jury convicted him of some of the charges. But I also didn't even convict him as a felon, because in my view, he had lived an extremely exemplary life, and I think had just gotten a little bit let his emotions get the better of him, use bad judgment, and he broke the law. To me, the process was punishment enough for of going through the trial, the embarrassment. He had to be on probation for a couple of years. But I was like, I don't need this man to spend the rest of his life as. When I say I don't need it, in my view, that wasn't
right, and that's what you're there for. Yeah, that's what
wasn't a fair result, yeah. And that was because the first 80 years of his life he played by the rules, and in most respects, you would call him an exemplary person if you had seen him in front of you and say, I don't know what you were thinking here, but you know, you never did anything before, except for the right thing.
Yeah,
so that matters.
This is always one in being in the law enforcement profession, and having friends that were defense attorneys and prosecutors and all that, and people would be like, how could this attorney defend this person? And this kind of goes back into your previous life and duties when you were a defense attorney. When somebody says that to you, how can you defend somebody for sexual battery or on a child or homicide or child abuse, or how can you do that? I mean, how did you do that?
I'll tell you, one of the things that always amused me about all the shows like Law and Order and stuff is, and there's some exceptions, but usually the good guy and the star is the prosecutor.
You're right.
And then if they show the defense attorney, it's like this slimy dude who's like twisting his mustache and he's figuring out like some trick way to get his guilty client, and the client's always guilty. And, the reality is both prosecutors and defense attorneys fill a vital role, just like law enforcement does. And you know this because you were in law enforcement so long. It is a system that is imperfect, but it's better than everyone else's. And it's designed to keep order in a society, but to make sure, to the best of our ability, there have been innocent people convicted, but to the best of our ability to make sure that somebody who didn't do anything wrong, or maybe didn't do as bad of a thing as what he's accused of, does not get punished for something he doesn't get more than he deserves.
That's the worst thing that could happen.
It's the worst thing. So a defense attorney, by a really good defense attorney, puts the system through its paces. Was the evidence gathered correctly? Was the warrant sworn out properly? Did officers do anything wrong during questioning or search of an automobile or a home? Is there an alternative theory of defense? Did they overlook something? Is there an alibi? And if you have a really good defense attorney work that case to the best of their ability, and you hope that the state has a really good prosecutor, because you don't want guilty guys running around who are dangerous, both sides go at it 100%. And it's a competitive adversarial system. And I love trying cases against great prosecutors. It was more fun than trying cases against inexperienced prosecutors because it was almost like a sport. And that's not to diminish the importance.
No, but it's a challenge,
but
right?
You're saying this one guy is really great.
You got to play a good game.
He's going to bring his A game, and I'm going to up mine.
Yeah.
So if both sides do that, the jury at the end has now heard every strength and possible weakness. They've seen the defense has poked every hole they can in the state's case, and the state's tried to explain it away. And if the guy's then found guilty, you have a pretty good confidence he's guilty. Now, if you say let's hamstring defense attorneys, nobody should be a defense attorney. They're a bunch of lowlives, and no good attorneys go into that gig, and you get a bunch of guys phoning it in. How much confidence do you have in the result?
Right.
You got law enforcement, unlimited funds on the state or government side, and a team of prosecutors, and then you get a schmo out there who's not even trying. Was he convicted because he's guilty, or was he convicted because it was the Harlem Globetrotters against, whoever else they used to play.
The Washington Generals.
Yeah, they always want, the team that's supposed to lose to the Globetrotters. Like, in Law and Order, there's
Patrick Jura played on the Washington Generals.
He was Jura on the Generals. Yeah, he was I think he was their
for years.
He was their center.
Yeah, he was their center. Yeah.
Power forward.
Yeah, he's a pickleball champ, too.
Yeah.
So, but no, that's and I always used to explain it because people would be like, you're a deputy and you go to court and you see these defense attorneys, and the defense attorneys, some of them don't have any mercy on law enforcement.
No.
They pound the crap out of us.
Sure.
But the reality is you got to be professional and know that, hey, they got a job to do. I only got mad at one defense attorney, won't mention any names, because we played softball together, and we were talking about, individual, or it wasn't even a person. We were talking about, my duties as a gang officer, and then he brings it up as in a depot, and I'm sitting there going, bro, come on, man.
I don't know if I would have pulled that one.
Yeah, and that's like super low blow, and
it's a little mixing of friends.
Yeah, and I'm like, come on, really? So that was, but I will tell you, as a police officer, a defense attorney was doing their job and doing it the proper way. I never took it personal, because you got a job to do, right?
Well, the longer I practiced criminal defense, the more I represented officers.
Yeah.
All walks of life, doctors, firefighters, teachers, but I represented a couple dozen police officers in my career, at least. And like everybody else, stuff happens to them. And just like all of us, and plenty of lawyers I represented too. And again, it was always a process to me. And I used to joke with cops that I knew who were friends of mine, which I have many, including you. And I would say, no, I don't hate police. I'm the first to call the police. I see some guy walking through my yard. I'm on the, we all have a role.
Yeah, a role. That's it.
My kids used to ask me when I was a defense attorney what I did, and I'd try to explain it, which is hard when they're real little. And they'd say, "So you're against the police?" And I'd say, No. Now as a judge, they're like, "Now you're on the police's side." And I said, "No." I said, "Now I'm in the middle. But before I wasn't against them." These are hard concepts for kids, and as you say, a lot of the public doesn't understand. Yeah. So, defense attorney is not necessarily the good guy. Prosecutor's not, or the bad guy. Prosecutor's not necessarily the good guy, although they often are. It's just people are. If everyone's fulfilling their role, the system should produce fairly reliable results.
Yeah, and like I said, everybody, it's like that piece of the puzzle, right? Everybody's got that piece of puzzle, and they got to know it. And when people get out of the line and get out of their boundaries, that's when things start to get. Let's talk about this one. Kind of a little fun. If you could swap jobs with anybody, any profession, judge, what would you like to do in one of those jobs, or for the day, or for a week, or for a year?
Yeah, that is such a tough. That's a tough one.
You could be a coach for the Gators or something.
I thought about that. That was like my initial reaction, but I thought, I don't understand how any of those guys withstand the stress.
It's tough, man.
I don't know how these coaches at the Division I level for major programs of Florida or Miami or Florida State, whatever, they're not keeling over like on a regular basis.
No, you lose one freaking game, and they're already talking about you going. You're done.
Yeah, people are throwing stuff at your house.
They're making $5 or $6 million now.
I guess I'd replace Billy Napier for one day and hire an offensive coordinator at Florida.
That'd be good.
Hire an offensive coordinator.
Light it up.
Why won't he do it?
Light it up.
It's a pure ego thing with him, but I honestly, it's gonna sound corny, I don't think I would trade with anybody right now.
Wow.
I love my job so much, and it's the old corny saying, if you love your job, then or you love going to work. Is it love what you do? You never work.
Never work a day.
Yeah, I'm messing it up.
No.
So I enjoy going to work. I enjoy doing my job. It's difficult some days, but I wanted it. I asked to be appointed. I was blessed to be appointed. I have the support of the citizens who originally elected me to the lower position, and I am honored to have it. So I wouldn't want to trade. I'm not being corny. I really can't think of another job I want to do more right now.
That's good.
Ask me in 10 years.
I will say it.
Right.
And I will tell you that, like, when I was in my duties in law enforcement, I was always trying to think of, you'd always like to be the quarterback for the Super Bowl, right? I'd be like, hey, I'll swap with Tom Brady or something like that. Maybe get to, take his wife out on a date or something like that. Oh, he's not married anymore, right? But no.
Job. I guess I didn't think about quarterback. Quarterback for the Bucks or something.
The Bucks, that'd be pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
You a big Bucks fan?
I am.
I've come to like the Bucks a lot. My good friend Dave gets season tickets here. So.
You grow up here, you got to be Bucks or Dolphins, and everybody else was on Dolphins because of Marino. And I've always been a contrarian. Maybe that's how I became a defense attorney. So they all like the Dolphins, and the Bucks were not very good when we were kids for many, many, many years. And so I decided I was going to be a Bucks fan, and I had a couple other friends when they had the cream school uniforms and the Bucko Bruce helmets. And then, lo and behold, they've won 2 Super Bowls. And since I became a fan, and Miami Dolphins still 0.
Yeah, no, that's
they
crazy.
They won a Super Bowl since the year I was born.
77?
73, right?
73. They won, 72. Sure. They
72 was
won undefeated. 73
then I think they won
won
again in 73.
Yeah.
I think that was the year I was
73.
born. So I guess
it's been a rough sled since then.
I guess I picked the right one. The Bucs have won 2 since then.
But
so,
Tom Brady. That was a great year, though.
one.
You got to admit, that was great. I'm a huge Patriot fan.
Well, then,
so, I mean, what a dream, right, for me.
So your take on him was you were happy for him when he won.
I was. I wasn't happy that he left because, you had that shakeup.
They kind of told him, you're done.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't understand Patriot fans who were mad at him because he would have kept playing quarterback for the Patriots, but they wanted to move on. And he had a little bit of gas left in the tank, which he proved with another ring down in Tampa. It also proved it wasn't all Belichick, which I think is good for both.
I agree.
They're both great at what they do. But, it's kind of like Urban Meyer at Florida. Yeah. I knew a lot of Florida fans. Traitor, because he said, I can't do it anymore. I'm quitting coaching. Then he's out a year, and then he's at Ohio State.
Mysterious, and I won't say it's a mysterious illness, but that was
whatever it was.
Whatever it was.
But I would say to friends of mine, I said, he didn't come up like Steve Spurrier as a Gator. He came in from a different coaching tree, a Midwest guy, wins 2 titles in the 5 or 6 years he's there, however long he's there. And I said, what else do you want from him? You paid him to be a coach, and he wins 2 titles. And you're mad at him? I said, I'll always be a fan. I think it's a weird way to look at things.
Yeah. Little input on Aaron Hernandez. That was crazy, right?
Well, this CTE, right? I don't know if that accounts for everything. But
they said he was pretty rough. He got away with a lot of shit in Florida. That's what I heard.
Well, apparently it runs in the family. I don't know if it was in the documentary I saw or an article, but I guess his father back in the day
had some tough
issues. And it's just
it's tragic, right?
I think a lot of these guys, their whole life, nobody puts the brakes on them because they're so good, and then ultimately they think they're invulnerable, and then they really do some crazy stuff. I defended some pro athletes and college athletes in my day. They're just a different breed.
Yeah.
And I tried the J.C. Jackson case up in Gainesville. When we got arrested out of a
was that
best player ever out of Collier County.
Yeah.
But a lot of coaches say best player ever out of Collier County. Most people say Edgerrin James. Nope, J.C. Jackson, best athlete they ever saw. Yeah, you even ask a coach. Immokalee said that. I'm doing this to mess with Jira because he loves Edgerrin James.
Yeah. Edgerrin. Well, and the Edge is the man, but
yeah,
he's proven Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is there's so many kids in Collier County, so many kids that have talent at that level that just never make it out. I was doing some freshmen.
How many guys that could have been in the Pro Bowl or the Hall of Fame never even played a down of college football because they got arrested or they couldn't get the grades. They didn't bother to take the SAT because nobody was there to guide them.
Yeah.
It's just weird to think about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
The unrealized potential.
Yeah. Well, and we'll wrap it up here in just a second, but if you were to write a book, and I know you're just beginning. I mean, you still got a lot of time left to go, and at your own pace, I'm sure. If you want to check out and do something else, you can. But if you love what you're doing, like I tell everybody, every day I'm retired, right? So every day I do only stuff that I enjoy doing it.
But you want to
that I do. Do I gripe around a little bit? Yeah, but I do everything because I want to do it.
That's great.
I've been fortunate and blessed, and I don't have to go grind unless I want to do it. But if you were to write a book at this point in your life right now, what would the first chapter focus on?
I have written the outline for a book.
Really?
Yeah, and I thought about this, and I Googled it. There's some other books out there. There's not one in Florida that I know of, but I thought, what do I know about? Now, I haven't been judged long enough to think about writing a book about being a judge. There have been judges like Hugh Hayes. The great Hugh Hayes, my friend.
Nancy and Hugh.
Our friend, and Nancy was a teacher in Naples. So she was. Naples is a small city that's still a small town. We all know each other going back. So Judge Hayes will hold the record for all time of longest serving judge in Florida. So if anybody's going to write a book on how to be a judge in Florida, it'd be on him, not me, with my 2 years experience.
Right.
But I did think, what do I know about that people might actually want to hear my opinion? So I started working on, and I checked with the state ethics people to see if this is okay, a book on how to defend a criminal case. Because when I started as a young public defender, there was nobody who said, is it okay to contact the victim in a case? And how do you talk to them? What's the appropriate thing to do? How do you negotiate for your client? what are some strategies to use? How do you talk to a judge? How do you prepare your case? How do you make money as a lawyer ethically? How do you get clients when you go into private practice? So, my first chapter would be, why do you want to be a criminal defense attorney? Because we talked a little bit about that earlier. If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and most people are, towards the end of my career, you'd be interviewing people that had 1 or 2 years experience at a firm or right out of law school. And really the conversation in the first 5 minutes for most of them would be about when do they get the BMW, essentially.
Yeah.
And you say, well, that BMW or whatever fancy car comes to the guy who works and proves himself. And those things come on their own.
Yeah.
But if that's your goal, you should probably go somewhere else, because this is a vocation. The good stuff comes to those.
And it takes some grinding.
You got to grind at it.
You
don't start out. Who gives you a BMW? I don't know. I mean, I never got. Nobody ever gave me one.
No one handed it over.
Nobody offered me one.
And a lot of it's funny now because people call me all the time. They're like, obviously when I was working, I really couldn't give referrals. But it's like, hey, go, so people call me all the time and ask me, hey, who would be a good person to, go with? I go, well, first, what's your budget, right? So, because, you got different levels. And you said, not always the best attorney is some of these attorneys that have the name, charge a lot, they're not always doing your cases all that great. And, you see that as a judge. You see, different ways people handle things. But do your research, right? I mean, there's people don't get it. Like, your life is, I say, essentially your life's on the line here.
It's a job interview.
You got to find out,
It's a job interview. I used to have new client consults, and a lot of these people would hire me and they'd say, every other attorney talked to us for 5 minutes and then said, I need $15,000, $25,000, whatever it was.
You're a good listener, though.
And also I didn't know if I wanted their case or if I was the right guy for them. So, it was a serious case. Maybe their son had been arrested for, drug trafficking at the college. He was selling pills allegedly. And you're talking to these people. They're educated people. They have means. As our career went on, we charged more and more money and built a reputation. Right. So you don't rush somebody through a 2-minute meeting. But what would be funny to me was towards the end of meeting, say you were being hired on a homicide, about as serious as it gets. And towards the end of the meeting, I would say sometimes to a father or writing me a check, right, signing a contract, and I'd say, don't you think there's one more thing you want to ask me? And they'd say, what's that? And I'd say, don't you want to ask me if I ever tried a homicide case before, a murder case? Yeah. And they'd say, well, I assume. And I said, well, just to let you know, I have. And, I think people were afraid to go to a lawyer or even a doctor and say, what are your results? How many cases like mine have you handled? And what would your plan be? And how has that worked in the past? How have you done in other cases? And a lot of these guys with the high dollar numbers, they don't want to answer those questions. And there's some guys that aren't charging a whole heck of a lot that, if anything, I think they undercharge. Guys that used to be colleagues of mine, I'm like, this guy's great. He should be, he should have the BMW. Yeah. But, a lot of it's marketing.
And we see that a lot, both in real estate. I sell real estate's so a big one. Yeah, name, marketing, boom, boom, boom. Yeah. You see that a lot in law enforcement. Sometimes our best cops are people who just stay under the radar, go out and grind every day, do what they're supposed to do, follow the laws, follow the rules, not the one that, tells everybody how great they are all the time. So, you see that a lot, So the reality is it's a very important decision to make. Don't always trust your friend. I get that all the time, divorce attorneys. I've been married a couple times. So, hey, I'm like, listen, do not ask me anything about, any type of marriage counseling, because I'll definitely fail you on that one. But definitely, I've got some really good friends that have done a good job with me. But the thing is, it's something you personally have to really check into yourself. Don't just take it for granted that somebody, you heard their name before, you saw it on a commercial or whatever the case may be. Hey, do some research.
And referrals are good too. If you trust a friend, and they say, I use this person, they're great. But still, you still got to go and talk to them and interview them and ask them tough questions, because they're going to be your lawyer. It may have worked out for your friend. Doesn't mean you're going to like what happens.
Yeah, no doubt. One last question. Evidence.
Yeah.
What's the craziest piece of evidence that you think you've ever gotten that you remember? I remember some interesting things. I can't remember putting them into evidence.
I don't know if I can think of one single one. I mean,
the reason why I asked that question is because a couple of those have popped up, and I've had to take toys, if you want to call it, into evidence, which wasn't funny at the time, but you have to take that stuff in. A lot of different types of paraphernalia. I mean, these people are creative.
Smoking,
these people are
smoke
creative.
Out of anything.
Smoke out of anything.
A pumpkin.
Put shit in anything. I mean, like they'll put in. I mean, you really smoke crap that came out of this?
Yeah.
And it's funny. I had one case before, and bless her, and she's in a better place. But Michelle Hill was trying it, and
rest her soul.
Yeah,
lovely
rest her soul.
Michelle.
We love Michelle, but so she was a prosecutor at the time, and she was, I'm the best, and then she became the defense attorney, and I'm the best, and then of course I had a case. I had an arrest in Golden Gate, so I jump out of the car. I don't know. He's probably like 18 or 19. He flees on me, and I hear this ting hit the ground. Well, kid takes off. I chase him down. I get lucky and catch him, right? So that's pretty much how it happens. I can't outrun these kids, but I get lucky and I catch him. So I end up looking in the little thing that went ting, and, looking at it. We found some crack and, a couple other things. And of course, we go to court, right? Michelle's like, oh, I got this one. I think she even did it pro bono, right? She's like, oh, I got this one.
She's going to get
you. The little ting, right? What's a little ting? So, of course, I go to court. I'm standing up there on the stand. What did you hear, Deputy Guerrette or Sergeant Guerrette or something at the time? And I'm like, well, I get out of the car, I exit the vehicle, and I hear this ting, and then the guy takes off running, and she looked at me, she goes, well, that little ting, did you see the little ting get dropped out of the pocket? I go, no, I just heard the little ting. So we kept going back and forth.
About the word ting.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about it is I didn't see it come out of the guy's hand and hit the ground, but I felt I had probable cause to make the arrest knowing that it was his.
Yeah, sometimes probable cause, not reasonable doubt.
Right.
You're like, hey, that's not your job, that's the jury's job.
I'm like, okay, I could probably articulate the fact that the little container was his and he dumped it. Of course, we get into court, so forever and ever. 20 years after that case, or 15 years after that case, she'd always be like, yeah, you didn't win that one, did you? Little ting. What was that? A little ting.
Kept lording that over you.
Yeah, she kept doing that one.
She was great.
I go, that's bullshit.
Well, you know what? One thing comes to mind just from my brief career as a judge, and this one's pretty good. I think I'll try to keep it short.
No.
I mean, I had so much weird evidence during my criminal career, and a lot of it I don't think the audience would like to hear about because it's creepy.
Yeah.
But as my criminal defense attorney, but as a judge, I was trying a drug case, and woman who was the defendant was arrested in a house on a search warrant, and you know how those are. They go in and hit the house. There's 4, 5, 6 different people in different bedrooms, so they're trying to figure out what belongs to who and who. And so she's arrested and charged with stuff in the room, and the argument is there's ladies' clothes her size. There's some documents in there of hers, and so the defense calls as a witness a guy who says, I'm her boyfriend. And this guy gets on the stand, and he looks like an old pirate. I think he had an eye patch. and he was an interesting looking guy, to say the least. And the defense attorney says, so you're her boyfriend. And he goes, she's your girlfriend. And he says, one of them. So, he's got multiple girlfriends. This guy's a real character.
He's a character, right?
So one of the things the state had, during their case, they made a big deal out of some dentures had been spotted in the room. And that's one of the reasons they knew it was her room, because they thought they were her dentures. So I think this is one of the main reasons as the defense called this guy. But the dentures hadn't been taken into evidence because, well, they weren't evidence. They had just left them and said, we saw dentures. And so the defense attorney says, do you have something in your mouth right now? He says, yeah. And he goes, what do you have in your mouth? And he goes, my teeth. Those were my teeth, not hers. Oh, he was saying she was spending the night at his place. And he yanks the teeth out of his mouth and starts chomping at the jury.
Understand.
And so at this point in time, I have to look like I'm judge-like. So I just sat there for a minute. I said, all right, sir, I think you've made your point. If you could put your teeth back in your mouth. And he went, put them right back in. Yeah, but he took the teeth out.
Oh, my God.
Those are my teeth, not hers.
That is great.
That was my room. And the whole thing goes on and on and on. So then he starts now he starts saying they were my drugs. Well, he'd never been charged in the case. State attorney comes, Judge, can we have a sidebar? Starts saying, Judge, this man has never been charged. He's now admitting to the crime. And I go, uh-oh. So I had to get him an attorney, and I called up one of the first I could find in my phone because a friend I had talked to the other day. And I hit it, and he answered the phone, and I can say his name. It's Derek Verderamo.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So Derek answers, goes, oh, what's going on? And I said, you should not have picked up this phone call. So he became the lawyer, the pro bono lawyer for that gentleman, because I couldn't allow him to incriminate himself. Well, with the teeth, I think coming out during the trial, that was one of my biggest tests because I almost lost it. I had no idea that was coming.
Nothing surprises you in this day and age. I had so many crazy things happen. It's just been fun. But listen, I want to tell you, I really appreciate you on this podcast. We got the video, we got the audio. I mean, it's been an hour and 1 minute.
Wow, time blew by. I'll do it anytime.
And we just love it. And we appreciate everything you do. And please tell Lynn how much we appreciate her and the family and doing what you guys do. And
appreciate your long service to our community.
No, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
You've done.
And folks like you in our community, we can't appreciate you guys enough. So,
well, it's just fun talking to a friend for an hour. We can do this for another hour, but I know
awesome.
you.
It's great. It's great. No, we'll
do it another time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Judge. I appreciate you.
Thanks
Thank you so much.
239
Uncensored, everything Southwest Florida and beyond. And we are out.